Lately, I've been seeing a lot of hate on Gibson guitars, and I'm starting to understand why. So right now, I actually own 3 different Gibson guitars. I own a 2007 Gibson Les Paul Standard, a 59 reissue from Gibson Custom Shop, and a Gibson J45 Banner Series, which I think is a 1942 reissue. But as you saw in the title, I don't think you should buy a Gibson. I lived in Nashville, which there's a lot of different music stores, and there's a lot of opportunity to play different Gibsons. I play majority Les Paul, so I've tried mainly Les Pauls and things like that, but I've been able to play a lot of Gibsons lately. The quality control is awful. Some of them don't stay in tune most of the time. Like basically if you find a good one, you kind of find a needle in the haystack. You got lucky that you found a good one. I came to this realization the other day. So I have a 59 reissue, which is them, Gibson Custom Shop, trying to replicate how they made the guitar back in the 50s, right? That was their standard run. They're trying to copy that the best they can. But nowadays, I'm pulling up the Gibson website. We have the Les Paul 50s faded, Les Paul 60s faded, 50s heritage. Like these guitars are nearly $3,000, okay? But also if we scroll down, here's a 59 Les Paul Standard reissue for basically $7,000. Twice as much. $3,000 is already an insane amount of money for a guitar. And now the Gibson Custom Shop for a 59 reissue is $7,000. But I had the thought, the 59 reissue is designed to copy how they made the guitar back in the 50s, right? Played quite a few of them. 56 reissues, 57 reissues, a couple 58s, 59s. They're fantastic instruments. They sound good, they play good, they look good, they stay in tune, everything's perfect about them. I just find it interesting how the iconic Gibson brand is basically saying in the 50s, which is, kind of really where they got their legacy from, they made them twice as good, right? Literally, because $7,000 to buy a replica of what they did in the 50s, but to buy a new one that they call a 50 standard over here costs $3,000, which is a lot of money, but it's still half the price of a custom shop, or actually it's over half the price, isn't it? Of course the quality control is bad. Of course they don't sound good. Of course they don't stay in tune well unless you get lucky and find where they're literally saying by their price that the Gibson iconic brand that, kind of developed throughout time, and you hear all these amazing records in the 60s, 70s, 80s using these guitars, they weren't playing those Les Pauls. They're playing the $7,000 guitar that's from the custom shop. So my whole hypothesis is I would just save up the money, and you can get, I probably wouldn't get a 54 reissue for $5,000, but 56, 57. If you want to get a Gibson that's like, this is a Gibson, this is what everybody's been talking about for decades now, you're going to have to pay $5,000. Or maybe you find one used or something like that. But that's the real Gibson, because they're obviously saying the normal models made in the Gibson regular factory, they're less than half as good. They're like 40% of what an actual Les Paul from the 50s, 60s, 70s were actually. So I would say I would not touch a Gibson made in the last 15 or so years. I think since then, I don't know what about them, they just don't play well. They don't sound good, they're not reliable. And I would say if you're gonna buy a new one, you have to save up longer and just go custom shop. I really think you have to go Gibson custom. Never touch a regular Gibson, it's just not gonna be worth it. I don't know if that solves the Gibson problem, but a lot of people are talking trash about them, and honestly, they're completely right. Like everything they're saying about them is 100% true. If you went and grabbed one of these standard models that are $3,000, which is insane, they're not comparatively to other $3,000 guitars. They're not that good. Like they're really not. Like I think I think a new Gibson is probably equal to an old Epiphone at this rate. Like I'm not even kidding. I really think it's that extreme. But it's just logically, if it's $7,000 to make, back in the 50s, they were literally just throwing woods together. They didn't even know what they were doing. They're like, oh, we'll just paint a burst on it. This looks cool. And no one was really interested in them. They just kind of threw them out there. Some have really fat necks and they're like unplayable. Some have comfortable sized necks. They were just thrown them together. And then eventually, people started loving them. And that's what really made their brand what it is today, is these iconic vintage guitars. And they're saying if you want that iconic Gibson guitar, $7,000. $5,000, $6,000. The iconic Gibson name is not these new standards. It is absolutely not a 50s. Like, if that's a 59 reissue and that's a 50s, that literally is 60% worse, right? If that's what a 59 actually kind of close as it can be was, that for $3,000, and I promise playing them is 100% accurate. That's on average 40% of what that guitar, which I don't know if you can see it, but it's over there on the wall. It's 40% of what that guitar. Actually, I'll just grab it. Gibson's literally saying that guitar right there, a 50 standard, but if you just look at the pricing, that's $3,000 compared to basically $7,000 for one of these. That's 40% of what this guitar is, and I would say that that's probably true. The woods are not as good on that. The pickups are probably pretty good, but just the overall construction reliability. I know a lot of people talk about the binding work's not good, some fretwork problems, and just tuning, the nuts not done right. Gibson is smart. They're using that Gibson name to sell guitars for $3,000 right now, but in reality, what that Gibson brand is about is this $7,000 guitar, and then they're doing crazy things to manipulate prices. Because reality, what I'm saying in reality, this guitar should be $3,000, right? There's no reason this guitar is not $3,000. The only reason this guitar is not $3,000 is because they're Gibson's inflating prices. I don't see if I can find the guitar, but they're massively inflating prices on the used market and things like that. So like here's like the new Kirk Hammett Greenie, $20,000. Like, that is insane. What they're doing, they're limiting supply on these. They're buying back the original Gibsons and selling them for like $500,000 or something like that. And the reason why is logically, if the original form of this sells for $500,000, well, 10 grand's not crazy, or 20 grand's not crazy. They're just completely inflating the prices. And 100% do not buy a normal Gibson. Like, I promise you, if you buy one, you might get lucky, but odds are you're not going to be happy. And you're like, is this really what the guitar people have been talking about for decades, hyping up the name? It's absolutely not. The guitar they're talking about is going to be one of these, a 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, or the 57. Those are really good too. But these are the guitars that they're hyping up, they're talking about. And at the end of the day, that's what a real standard is right there. It's $7,000. It should be $3,000 or something like that. And then honestly, what I think Gibson should do is make these $3,000, make the current standard the price of an Epiphone, and then just get rid of Epiphone. Right? Obviously, I'm not the business person because they just want to jack up prices. But if you're just looking at quality of the guitar when you actually pick it up, what it's actually valued, this is probably what a $3,000 guitar should play like. And that is probably what, I don't know what 40% of that would equate to, $1,500 at $2,000. So let's say it's $1,700. That should be a $1,700 guitar right there. And this should be a $3,000 guitar. I think if they price like that, which is an accurate pricing, they'd be like, hey, this is like the Les Paul standard almost. Like, it's almost there. Because this is the real Les Paul standard. Like, are you kidding me that after 60, 70 years, you're saying you're half as good at building guitars? Like, is that really what they're saying? I think that's what they're saying. They're like, yeah, after 60 years ago, our luthiers were way better. They could throw out guitars for super cheap and all this. And nowadays, to build the same guitar, it costs $7,000. But we also have a crappier version that's probably not worth playing for $3,000 or $2,500. Plus taxes, shipping, you're talking like 33, 35. And it's absolutely insane. And to me, they're literally saying a new Gibson is not worth buying. Like, it really is. It's basically an Epiphone. Like, it's basically half as good as the iconic name. So I personally, if you're saving up $3,000, you're about to buy it, I would hesitate and say don't buy it. I wouldn't buy it. I would either be patient and wait and maybe find one of these used for a good price, like $4,000 to $5,000 price range, or just go, if you want a new one, just keep on saving up. But you're not going to get the full Gibson experience by buying one of those. And I think why I personally love Gibson, and when I think of the word Gibson, I instantly think either custom shop, or I think Gibson from 15 years ago back. or maybe 20 years ago and back. That's what I'm thinking for Gibson. The modern Gibsons they're literally half as good. Like, and you look at the pricing, that's exactly what the pricing's saying. Gibson, with their prices, are saying, yeah, these are, we're going to call them a 50s. What do they call them? Les Paul Standard 50s. We're going to call it a Les Paul Standards 50s, but it's actually just 50% of what it was. I don't think a Gibson Standard model is a real. It's like basically an Epiphone. Like they need to have like Gibson cheap. They need to rename to like Cheapson. They need to have Gibson and Cheapson, and the new $3,000 guitar should be like 1,500 maybe. And sell these for $335, maybe $4,000 at tops. Those guitars are not worth buying. And so all the hate on the internet I see with Gibson, I 100% agree, but I will have to say, I think the reason why it's true that they're not good guitars, are not worth buying, is simply the fact that they're not even designed to be what Gibson is supposed to be. This is what Gibson is claiming they're supposed to be, which is a Gibson custom shop. The new standard models is basically, since we've inflated prices because we're trying to sell guitars for $500,000 and then make a new Kirk Hammett model for $50,000 and then another one for $20,000, we're trying to stretch these prices out so we can sell a Cheapson, not a Gibson, a Cheapson for $3,000 when it's actually worth like $1,100, $1,200. Some people still love them, they buy them, and they think, oh, this is the heritage of the Gibson brand. All my favorite guitar players played these. In reality, they did not play that guitar. They played, what Gibson's saying is they played something like this. Those other things are they're not real Gibsons. So I'm gonna end the video. I would say, do not buy a Gibson. Save it for a Gibson custom, or just go to another brand. I really don't think, go to PRS, go to something like that. It's not worth buying one of these fake standard 50s or 60s or whatever they want to call them, because they're not real Gibsons, and their prices are clearly reflecting that they don't even believe they're real Gibsons.